new developments on the continued threats and fear in Springfield, the city thrown into the middle of a political firestorm, and the leaders there warning people to stop. Our Brian Duffy here now with the latest after the mayor there issues a proclamation. Brian.
Yeah, Tiffany, that proclamation allows the city to bypass their normal purchasing standards, basically so they can protect themselves against multiple bomb threats and cyber attacks. Governor Mike DeWine making his second trip there today to offer some financial help. The mayor there says even with the state and local law enforcement on hand, a proposed visit from President Trump would put an additional strain on those first responders.
We are working closely with law enforcement and first responders to ensure public safety remains our top priority. While the visit brings attention to our city, it also represents logistical challenges that require careful planning and allocation of our resources to minimize disruption of daily life. As a visit from the former president will undoubtedly place additional demands on our safety infrastructure. Should he choose to change his plans, it would convey a significant message of peace to the city of Springfield.
Springfield has seen an influx of about 15,000 Haitian immigrants in the last 4 years. After this month's debate, it found itself in the middle of a political battle as former President Trump repeated some unfounded information the governor said wasn't true. It led to threats against schools, city buildings, and grocery stores. The state has added the highway patrol and bomb-sniffing dogs at every school. When the former president announced plans to make a campaign stop in Springfield last night, it created a number of security concerns.
And you know what? They've got to get much tougher. I'm going to go there in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to Springfield and I'm going to Aurora. You may never see me again, but that's okay. Got to do what I got to do. Whatever happened to Trump? Well, he never got out of Springfield.
Both Governor DeWine and Mayor Roos say they have not spoken with former President Trump about delaying or even canceling his visit. In fact, they haven't spoken with the former president at all. But Mr. Trump isn't the only one stretching these already thin resources. Former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy is set to host a town hall in Springfield tonight. And just hours ago, a congressional delegation announced plans to visit Springfield next week to offer support to the city and to visit with members of the Haitian community.